There is a video. It was posted to Twitter in January of 2018. In it, a large white semi-truck glides along a two-lane desert highway at what appears to be highway speed. The road is straight. There is no visible incline. The truck moves with authority, its massive frame cutting silently through the dry air of the American West. The man who posted it wrote that this was the future of transportation. He called it the most advanced truck the world had ever seen. He said it ran on hydrogen. He said it was producing over 1,000 horsepower. He said it was zero emission. He said it worked. Not one of those claims was true. The truck had no motor. It had no hydrogen fuel cell. It had no gears. What it had was gravity. Investigators would later reconstruct exactly what happened on that road. A crew had towed the Nikola 1 prototype to the top of a gently sloping stretch of highway on the Mormon Trail south of Grantsville, Utah. They had positioned the camera at a low angle and tilted it slightly to make the grade appear flat. Then someone released the brakes and the truck rolled south. It rolled for approximately 2 miles. It reached a speed of around 56 miles per hour. When Hindenburg Research replicated the experiment 2 years later, driving their own vehicle down the same hill with the engine off and the transmission in neutral, they got nearly identical results. By the time the full scope of what had happened became clear, the company behind that video had achieved a market capitalization of $34 billion. It had signed a $2 billion partnership with General Motors. It had taken in hundreds of millions of dollars from institutional and retail investors. It had never produced a single truck capable of driving under its own power. It had never produced a single kilogram of hydrogen. And for years, while all of this was not happening, the systems built to stop it simply did not. This is the story of how that was allowed to occur. Trevor Milton was born in the early 1980s and grew up on a farm in rural southern Utah. He did not graduate from high school in the conventional sense, eventually obtaining a general equivalency diploma. He attended Utah Valley State College for 1 semester before dropping out to work in sales. He was not an engineer. He had no formal training in energy systems, propulsion technology, or vehicle manufacturing. What he had was an unusual and well-documented talent for persuasion. His first business was a home security company he registered in 2004 at the age of 22. He sold it for $1.5 million. He then founded a succession of small companies, each built more on promotional momentum than on substantial underlying technology. People who worked with Milton during this period, and who later spoke to journalists after Nikola's collapse, described a consistent pattern. He was charismatic and energetic. He had a talent for making a pitch feel inevitable. He also had a documented tendency to describe what his companies were about to do as though they had already done it. In 2014, Milton founded a company in Salt Lake City, Utah, with an initial $2 million investment from an industrial company called Worthington Industries. He named it after Nikola Tesla, the Serbian-American inventor, whose work in alternating current electricity had transformed the industrial world at the turn of the 20th century. The choice was not coincidental. Elon Musk's Tesla was by then becoming a dominant force in the public imagination around electric vehicles, and by naming his company after the same inventor, Milton positioned Nikola as the natural companion or heir to that story, before the company had produced anything at all. The company's stated mission was to build battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell semi-trucks for commercial freight, supported by a national network of hydrogen fueling stations that would be embedded into the lease agreements for its vehicles. The logic of the business model was, on its surface, coherent. Long-haul trucking is one of the largest sources of freight emissions in the United States. Diesel-powered Class 8 semi-trucks are expensive to operate, environmentally damaging, and subject to increasingly strict regulation. A hydrogen-powered alternative, with a proprietary fueling network controlled by the manufacturer, was the kind of vertically integrated vision that serious investors had learned to recognize as a signal of serious long-term thinking. It was also, in Nikola's case, almost entirely fictional. On December 3, 2016, Milton stood in front of a large crowd at an event in Salt Lake City and unveiled the Nikola One, the company's flagship hydrogen fuel cell semi-truck. The truck was large, aerodynamically sculpted, and visually striking. Milton told the audience and the live internet broadcast that the truck fully functions and works, which is really incredible. He said it was not a pusher, the industry term for an inoperable prototype designed only to look functional. He said it had over 1,000 horsepower and over 2,000 foot-pounds of torque. Federal prosecutors, in documents filed years later, laid out precisely what was missing from the Nikola One on the day of its unveiling. The truck had no gears. It had no motors capable of driving the wheels. It had no hydrogen fuel cell. Its control system, the mechanism by which a driver's inputs would be transmitted to the vehicle, was incomplete. The infotainment screens inside the cab were tablet computers, displaying images designed to look like speedometers and navigation maps. The truck could not move under its own power. It never moved under its own power. Nikola would eventually acknowledge, after years of denial, that the Nikola One was never completed. The company stated that as it had pivoted to newer vehicle programs, it had decided not to invest resources in making the original prototype functional. In January of 2018, 13 months after the Salt Lake City unveiling, Milton posted the In Motion video. The caption described the truck as the 1,000 horsepower, zero-emission Nikola One semi-truck in motion. In the replies to the post, someone from Nikola's verified corporate account confirmed that the truck had over 1,000 horsepower and could handle a 7% grade with no problem. The specific phrasing, in motion, would become important later. It is technically accurate in the narrowest possible sense. A truck rolling downhill is in motion. But the phrase was not a philosophical statement about kinetics. It was chosen to convey to any reasonable observer that the truck was operating under its own power, while remaining deniable if that claim were ever challenged. The road had been scouted in advance. It was a lightly used section of the Mormon Trail, a straight 2-mile stretch with a consistent 3% grade. The camera had been positioned at a low angle and tilted to suppress the appearance of slope. Hindenburg Research later drove the same road in neutral and reached 56 miles per hour. Social media users independently replicated the test after Hindenburg published its findings, one of them in a Toyota Tacoma that reached 48 miles per hour. None of these vehicles had 1,000 horsepower. They were simply descending a hill. By early 2020, Milton had been constructing the public narrative of Nikola's technological progress for more than 3 years. The company had grown in headcount and physical presence. It had purchased 389 acres of land in Arizona for a manufacturing facility that was never built. It had announced partnership agreements with Bosch and C&H Industrial. It had attracted investment from institutional players including Fidelity Management and Research Company. What it had not done was build a truck that worked. In March of 2020, Nikola announced plans to go public through a merger with a special-purpose acquisition company called Vecto IQ Acquisition Corporation. Special purpose acquisition companies are shell entities created specifically to merge with a private company and take it public, bypassing the scrutiny of a traditional initial public offering. The SPAC structure offered Nikola several critical advantages. It was faster. It involved less regulatory review at the point of listing, and it allowed the company's executives to continue making promotional statements during the merger process in ways that a standard quiet period would have prohibited during a conventional IPO. Milton used that window aggressively. He said the company was producing hydrogen at below $4 per kilogram. Nikola had not produced hydrogen at any location at any price. He said the Badger, an electric pickup truck the company was now promoting, had been engineered from the ground up using Nikola's own in-house intellectual property. It had not. He said the company's truck reservations represented billions of dollars in committed revenue. The reservations were non-binding and could be canceled without penalty at any time. The merger closed on June 4, 2020. Within days, shares surged past $80. By June 9th, Nikola's market capitalization briefly touched $34 billion. For context, Ford Motor Company at that time was generating approximately $115 billion in annual revenue and producing millions of vehicles per year. Nikola had generated zero revenue. It had delivered nothing to any customer. Trevor Milton became a billionaire on paper. His net worth reached approximately $12 billion at the peak. The timing was not incidental. In the spring and summer of 2020, a large number of retail investors were at home during the pandemic, with stimulus money in their accounts and access to zero-commission brokerage applications on their phones, actively searching for the next transformative opportunity. The electric vehicle narrative was dominant. Tesla's stock was rising sharply. Into that environment, Nikola arrived with a story that seemed to confirm everything the market already wanted to believe. The company bore the name of the greatest electrical inventor in history. Its trucks looked extraordinary in renderings and in promotional videos. Its founder spoke in the idiom of the visionary, comparing himself to Elon Musk and telling television audiences to come back in 12 months and watch how it's done. The money moved accordingly. On September 9, 2020, Nikola announced a partnership with General Motors. Under the terms as publicly described, General Motors would take an 11% equity stake in Nikola, contribute $2 billion in-kind services, including battery and fuel cell technology, and manufacture the Nikola Badger pickup truck. General Motors chief executive Mary Barra said the company had conducted appropriate due diligence. Nikola's stock rose sharply. One day later, on September 10th, Hindenburg Research published its report. The report was 67 pages long. It was titled, Nikola: How to Parlay an Ocean of Lies into a Partnership with the Largest Auto Original Equipment Manufacturer in America. It included testimony from a former chief engineer at Nikola who confirmed that the in-motion video had been filmed by towing the truck to the top of a hill and releasing the brakes. It documented the missing components in the 2016 prototype. It presented evidence that Nikola had covered a third-party supplier's brand name on a key electrical component with a sticker in a promotional video, creating the impression that the part had been developed internally. It cataloged the hydrogen production claims Milton had made, and it noted that Nikola had not produced hydrogen at any location. Nikola's initial response was that the report was false and defamatory, designed to negatively manipulate the market in order to financially benefit short sellers. Milton called it a hit job. Within 4 days, Nikola's own statement confirmed the central allegation. The company acknowledged that the truck in the in-motion video had been rolled downhill. Its defense was that it had never explicitly claimed the truck was moving under its own propulsion. The phrase "in motion," the company argued, had not constituted that specific claim. Milton resigned as executive chairman on September 20th, retaining his shares and his ranch in Utah, a property of approximately 4,600 acres that he had purchased for $32.5 million using stock options from a land deal in which the seller had been persuaded to accept Nikola equity in lieu of cash, on the basis of representations about the company's value that courts would later find were materially false. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation. The Department of Justice convened a grand jury. General Motors renegotiated its agreement, eliminating the Badger pickup truck entirely and reducing the partnership to a more limited arrangement before eventually severing ties with the company. In July of 2021, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York unsealed a criminal indictment against Milton on 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of securities fraud. The indictment alleged that Milton had made false statements about nearly all aspects of Nikola's business across a 10-month period covering the SPAC transaction and the company's first months as a public company. In December of 2021, Nikola Corporation itself settled civil fraud charges with the Securities and Exchange Commission for $125 million without admitting wrongdoing. Milton's criminal trial lasted 1 month. In October of 2022, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all 3 counts. He was sentenced in December of 2023 to 4 years in prison and fined $1 million. The federal sentencing guidelines had suggested up to 60 years. Prosecutors had requested 11 years. Prosecutors later sought a restitution order of $680 million to Nikola shareholders, plus $15 million to the man who had sold Milton his ranch in exchange for stock options that were by then worth nearly nothing. In March of 2025, President Donald Trump issued a full pardon to Trevor Milton. As a direct consequence, the court was legally barred from ordering any restitution of any kind. The investors who had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some documented cases, the entirety of their retirement savings, received nothing. Milton released a statement. He said the pardon was not just about him, that it was about every American who has been railroaded by the government. Nikola filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in February of 2025. Shares that had traded at nearly $80 in June of 2020 were by then trading under $1. The structural question that surrounds Nikola is not primarily about Milton. His behavior was documented and prosecuted. The more durable questions are about the institutions that surrounded him while the fraud was still in progress. The SPAC structure, a special purpose acquisition company, was the primary vehicle. It offered a faster path to public markets with substantially less scrutiny than a conventional listing. The institutional investors who anchored the transaction had contractual incentives to close the deal and deploy capital. The retail investors who bought shares on the secondary market had access only to what Milton was saying publicly on Twitter, on podcasts, and in television interviews. The gap between those two information environments was structural, and it was part of what made the scheme work as long as it did. Fidelity management and research anchored the SPAC transaction. General Motors committed to a $2 billion partnership after conducting what it described as appropriate due diligence. Bosch and other industrial suppliers entered into agreements with the company. None of these entities raised public concerns about the discrepancy between Milton's claims and Nikola's actual technological state before Hindenburg Research, which had a direct financial interest in the company's decline, published a 67-page report doing so for them. The Securities and Exchange Commission brought a civil case against the company the year after the fraud became public, not before. The Department of Justice indicted Milton 9 months after Hindenburg's report appeared. The regulatory apparatus moved in response to an exposure that had already occurred through other means, rather than in anticipation of it. The primary mechanism by which Nikola's fraud was exposed was not a regulator, not an institutional investor, not a board member, and not a journalist. It was a short seller who had a financial stake in the company's collapse, who drove down the same hill in neutral and documented what happened. This is not unique to Nikola. It is the standard pattern. Companies that collapse under documented fraud rarely do so because a regulator identified the problem and intervened. They collapse because someone outside the system, usually someone with a direct financial incentive to find the problem, puts information into public circulation that the market then prices. The regulatory action follows the collapse. The restitution, if it comes at all, arrives years later. In Nikola's case, the mechanism for restitution was closed permanently by executive order before it could be completed. The people who lost the most received nothing. The man who had caused the losses was pardoned and free. In January of 2018, someone released the brakes on a truck at the top of a hill in Utah. The truck rolled south on the Mormon Trail for approximately 2 miles. Someone filmed it, with the camera tilted so the grade would not show. The video was posted with a caption calling it a 1,000 horsepower, zero-emission vehicle in motion, and the people who watched it believed what they were told. The truck had no motor. It had no hydrogen. It was rolling downhill. $34 billion was built on top of that image and on dozens of other claims like it. And when it finally came apart, the people who built it walked away, and the people who believed it absorbed the loss alone. Nothing in the system that was supposed to prevent that outcome prevented it. The outcome was never prevented. It was simply absorbed. If you want to see more investigations like this one, subscribe. Every story on this channel follows the same method. Find the anomaly, trace the money, and ask who knew and chose not to stop it.